This is News Fash, the podcast where fashion and news meet for your weekly dose of insider insights. I'm your host, fashion journalist Moshe Lundstrom-Halbert, and together we're going to stay up to date and open to learn about fashion from a variety of perspectives.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of News Fash Live. If you're joining me on TikTok, welcome back. And this whole episode will be recorded and shared wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube. And today I am joined by a very special guest and friend of mine, Mark Uquiko. Mark is a very esteemed consultant in the fashion industry, both on the brand and retail side. And he has over a decade of experience working within the industry. And before we get into the entree, the news story of the week, and I'd love to hear any of your questions and comments regarding it, I just wanted to welcome you first, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
It's such a busy week, and I just knew that I couldn't get into all of this on my own. But before we get into the Hermes made in China question mark of it all, and the impending controversy that is erupting here on TikTok in the luxury industry, I wanted to ask you, Mark, about your thoughts, and all of you as well, on some of the top fashion news stories of the week. Of course, we got to talk about, did you see the news today? You're in LA, Mark, so you probably woke up to this. Jonathan Anderson is the new man at Dior.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been rumors about him being, definitely being the designer for Dior for quite a while now, but I was actually quite surprised that he's only doing men's.
Me too.
Which is kind of interesting, but like it kind of makes sense because he is one of the, if there was someone who's going to be able to tackle the men's, it is definitely Jonathan Anderson. He's one of the few designers who's actually able to move and men for men to buy his products in Loewe, for example,
Yes.
especially in the Asian market and like in the European market and North American market. He's one of the few designers aside from Jacquemus who can actually move the men's clientele to actually buy the menswear products. So it definitely makes sense.
Totally.
And on top of that, I think it also makes sense with his direction that he wants to also now, I feel like, try to embrace his creative side with all the movies he's doing. Like last year, he did 2 movies with costume design, with Queer and also Challengers.
Yes.
So this will actually probably give him more time to do that. And also, just to focus on the menswear side for Dior. And see, he still technically has the JW Anderson brand, right? So
he better not get rid of that brand because I love JW Anderson, the brand. It's like more affordable Loewe.
I agree.
A lot of the times. Well, that's a very positive read, and I certainly can attest to how well received his menswear at Loewe has been. I also wear the men's Loewe. I think it's fantastic. But there's also what people are saying behind the scenes too, because it really was, we were talking about this in the way that he was going to take over Dior men's and women's. And the question remains is, did Maria Grazia Chiuri, could they not get her out of her contract? This seems like less of a major promotion, right? Because he's gone from designing men's and women's at Loewe, which is obviously a smaller house, to just designing men's at Dior. I mean, I think men's at Dior is probably smaller than Loewe men's and women's these days of what he's brought it to. Do you think he's maybe in a holding pattern to let Maria Grazia Chiuri's contract finish and then ascend the throne and take over the full Dior portfolio?
Perhaps, and also perhaps LVMH is testing him for such a big brand, right? So maybe they're testing him up for one season first for just men's, and who knows, he might take over women's as well, but we'll see about the sales. It's all about sales at the end of the day. So we'll see how this year folds for
Do you think he's a stronger menswear designer or women's wear, or do you think he's about equal?
I think he's about equal, right? I think, and I feel like a lot of the clothes that he makes are actually quite unisex. Like I know
Hmm.
some men who would wear some of the women's wear stuff, and I know some like women's like yourself would wear some of the men's wear stuff. So
Hmm.
and even the bags of some of them are interchangeable, the accessories, right? And the sunglasses, like, men would buy, wear the women's sunglasses, especially these days. I think it's quite interchangeable. It's, everything's fluid.
Wow, you've just made me think there too, because like maybe part of that strategy is that the Dior men's brand, which had been under Kim Jones for the past few years, had maybe
Mm.
lost some of its luster or zeitgeist, and maybe he'll be able to really grow that men's business, and to your point, like also make it appeal in a more unisex way across the board and help that business expand. Because it did come out last week, actually, that LVMH profits are down around 3% company wide,
Mm.
which is sounds small, but is huge with a company of that size and scale. They have 75 brands in their portfolio. And
Yeah.
Hermes, Hermes has surpassed them in market value. Hermes only has one brand. I mean, they might have a couple others like John Law, but it's mainly Hermes. So it does seem like they're really trying to have a bit of a changing of the guard at LVMH. Do you think that this move might be enough?
Well, I definitely think it's exciting. I hope Loewe stays. I mean, this also depends if Loewe which is also under the LVMH umbrella, which is now, being by the Proenza guys, are now the new designers. We'll see how that goes too, right? So they're all under one portfolio. So we'll see how all these brands go about. But it clearly, what's clear is what Kim Jones made for Dior might have, his designs might have wasn't like tickling people's fancy anymore.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's definitely
Mhm.
lost its luster or lost its appeal a little bit. And it's too bad because I actually was a fan of the last show that he did. The very last show that Kim Jones did. I thought it was spectacular.
One of his
But
strongest for sure.
I agree. But perhaps like the sales weren't there prior to that. And obviously he already knew that was his last show. So we'll see. I'm sure Jonathan Anderson will definitely make Dior Men like a bigger brand and a stronger business for the menswear business for Dior. And we'll see. I'm actually really excited about it.
Putting on your retailer hat, if you were consulting for one of your retail clients who, let's say, carries Loewe, are you concerned or are you also excited about what's going to happen there, given the announcement that the Proenza Schouler founders, Lazaro Hernandez and Jack McCullough, are taking on that role as co-creative directors?
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, to be quite honest, like I haven't, seen there hasn't been a lot of like exciting projects from them in a while. So, but it is interesting that they're taking on the Wave. So, of course, we'll keep an eye on see what will come out of it. But it's exciting. I mean, I think those are the two brands are to look out for right now. There's still a lot of designers that are not, have not been announced yet in all these fashion houses. So those everyone's still anticipating on when
Mhm.
these announcements will be. So yeah, it's an interesting time in fashion. It feels like it's almost like a fashion reset.
Totally. And another designer appointment that broke this week as well is the quite emerging Dutch designer Duran Lantique, who was runner up last year in the LVMH Fashion Prize, got announced as the new creative director of Jean Paul Gaultier, which is owned by the Puig Group out of Barcelona. What do you make of that appointment, Mark?
Well, it's true that from my understanding that he's from within, right? He's from within the team, or
I don't, maybe he had worked with the team on a consulting basis, but they had that model where they were doing guest designers for a while, which I thought was really smart. Somewhat
yes.
similar to the Montclair Genius model, where they even brought in Simone Rocha and some of the same names, Heider Ackerman. But yeah, I think it was a bit of a surprise to some that he had been given that appointment because he hadn't done a guest collection like many others had.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I actually thought it was going to be someone who's going to be a little more well known, like Ludovic Sansonen or something.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I'm actually not too familiar with him, so I can't speak much about him. But yeah, I mean, I'm actually quite surprised too. But we'll see where this goes, right?
definitely. And then there was 3 or 4 big campaigns that dropped recently that I would
Mhm.
love your thoughts on. We had a new Prada bag campaign. The casting was like Kendall Jenner, who in 2024 was the highest paid model. Apparently, she raked in $40 million. And then also Troye Sivan and Hunter Schafer. Did you see that campaign?
Yes, I
What
definitely
did you
did.
think of that?
I thought it was like a great cast. I mean, definitely great cast for Prada, and definitely Troye Sivan and Hunter Schafer have long been Prada muses for a while now, right? Um, not sure if Kendall has ever been a muse for Prada before in the past, but
She's modeled for them. Yeah.
she's modeled for them, but not, yeah, I'm not sure if she's ever been
Mhm.
on a campaign for them.
Mhm.
I thought it was quite it was beautiful. I mean, the photos look incredible. Not sure if these are AI. Um,
Or if they actually
I'm not.
showed up.
Well, which is another topic. Like, I'm not sure which. I mean, if this is actually shot in a studio or
It's
is it
supposed to be a
actually in a
boat.
lake?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, is it in a studio or it was actually shot in a studio or in a lake or is
That's a
it
good
AI?
question. Or is it
You
AI?
know,
Or a
so
bit of both.
yeah, or a bit of both. So, but I thought it was shot beautifully. What are your thoughts?
I'm getting a bit tired of the celebrity casting. I don't know.
Mm,
I just think it's like look at Bottega Veneta. Like I just think it's a lot more effective for them to allow to just kit out Jacob Elordi in Bottega bags and allow him to get captured to and fro by paparazzi and let it go viral on social media versus like putting him in some very manufactured campaign. I just I personally love to see really good looking models in campaigns, which you could argue that like Hunter Schafer, I guess Kendall Jenner is, but it wasn't so original to me. Also, I'm just there was a deadness to the facial expressions that
mhm.
didn't do a lot for me. And I think Prada is like quite comfortable right now because they're one of the few luxury brands that's doing super well, especially with Miu Miu. So I just didn't feel like they're really pushing themselves to put forth something that was like really out there in the way that they could. Like, which is interesting because then I looked at the Burberry campaign and it made me feel completely differently because it was literally Burberry swim, which we've all seen the bikinis, right? Like
Right.
there's nothing really new there from a fashion perspective, but the campaign starred Rosie Huntington Whiteley. I mean, she's such a Burberry girl. And
Yeah.
the number one tennis player in the UK right now, Jack Draper, and then a model, Alva Clark, and another model too, Barbara and Doya. And they were like on a boat in Dubai and it was shot on film and it actually like captured some real spontaneity. And I don't know, I love that. Like it made me want a Burberry bikini.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like the even the videos that were shot for them, it seems like more catered towards like the Gen Z style of like how they captured videos and it's a
Yes,
little bit more, you know what I mean? It's a little bit more
multimedia.
relevant to these days as opposed to like the traditional what a campaign should look like. So I definitely do think they did that really well. And but again, like the casting is they're celebrities basically. One is a tennis star and one is a supermodel. So
True, but
it's
they
pretty
like
much the same.
yeah, you're right, you're right. I guess I feel like they were like interacting in a way where I just felt there was more of a narrative versus like
Yeah.
staring at the camera and looking like fashionably depressed.
Yeah. There's definitely more life to it. That's for sure. And but hey, Prada is always that's kind of like their look, isn't it?
It is, it is. And I mean, I'm literally wearing Prada shoes right now.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there was just if you compare and contrast. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we had the Alessandra Michele campaign for Valentino, which starred Amelia Gray. I think
Yes.
it's really interesting how she's become such a big model and used quite widely. And the campaign was all about capturing like everyday moments of everyday life, which in Alessandra Michele's world means like eating an ice cream cone with a parrot on your shoulder or like riding a bicycle in a sparkly slingback. You
Okay.
know, he has that like
Well,
really romanticized, charming lens with which he views the world. But what do you make of the direction he's going in for Valentino these days? Also from like a retailer perspective.
Yeah, I think he's definitely doing exciting things with Valentino. And he's definitely a lot of the Alessandro Michele, fans definitely will follow, have been following him and have followed him and his work. So I am personally a fan of what he did with this new campaign, the videos of like you said, like the captured everyday life, um, and in terms of like a retail perspective, yeah, I mean, he's definitely pushing. I think he's doing exciting things in the apparel space and also in the accessory space. We'll see if that translates to sales, so we'll see.
But if you were talking to one of your multi-brand retailer clients, do you think there would be some concern like that the Valentino business is going to cannibalize the Gucci business because obviously there is some aesthetic overlap there?
Yeah, not necessarily right now, especially with Gucci. Gucci's a little different. Yeah, I mean, right now, it's there's not really a lot of overlap, I think. Um, but it's quite different.
Do you mean because of like the palette cleanse that happened at Gucci?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Right. So and also like the aesthetic has changed a little bit, So I think there's a little bit of a difference there, but we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll see stronger sales from Valentino this year.
I mean, I do think Alessandro Michele is another example like Jonathan Anderson of a designer who is just feels really fluid and comfortable going from menswear to
Yes.
women's wear and like blurring those lines. It feels seamless, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely. And yeah, and that's kind of like his clientele, right? And he was kind of like at the forefront of that, to be quite honest. Like, and with Styles, really becoming his muse, and Jared Leto, they're really the pioneers for having that fluidity with dressing and wearing, very flamboyant,
mhm.
peacock-esque, like way of dressing for men. And I think it's only, it really has, now it has a world of its own, now it's really everyone's in the red carpet. Now you'll see a lot of men dressing like peacocks, like having embellished like jewelry and on their suits, like all these brooches and
Yes,
yes, it's actually, and I
totally.
think they've really started that, to be quite honest. It was Harry Styles and Alessandro Michele and Jared Leto.
Harry Styles walked so Timothy Chalamet could run, you know,
Yeah.
stylistically. Okay, but let's talk about the main event of this week.
Hmm.
My phone has been blowing up about this. The amount of DMs I've gotten, I don't know about you. And I would really love for everyone to be weighing in here as well in the
Yes.
comments. So, to summarize, there is a man, presumably in China, who's created some videos that have caused quite an uproar named Sen or Wang Sen Bags. And to me, he seems like he might be a producer of counterfeit goods in China for the Asian and international markets. And
Mhm.
he is putting forth a theory that it costs $1,400. Basically, he has two main theories, and we need to make sure we don't conflate them. One is that it costs $1,400 to make your average Hermes Birkin bag, and that it then sells for $38,000. And that they can just make it just as good in China. And then the second argument he made is that over 80%, he said, of luxury bags, luxury brands mainly defined by, we're talking about the European luxury houses, mainly under the Kering, Richemont, and LVMH brand
Mhm.
portfolios, are made in China. And a lot of people, I think, took those two videos and combined them into one and basically thought that what he was basically saying is that all Hermes bags, or 80% or more, are made in China. And I wanted to ask your opinion on this for a number of reasons. One is you have expertise in the fashion, retail, and brand arenas. And then two is you've also lived in China, in Shanghai before too, and seen
Correct.
firsthand how the fashion industry and the luxury industry interacts with the Chinese world of manufacturing. So illuminate us, Mark. Is this true? Tell us. Give us the tea.
Well, there's a couple of things here with regards to that specific video. I mean, I think the video was taken down, and I think Hermes actually made a class. I
Do you
think
think
made a lawsuit. Well, I think they're the ones who made a lawsuit to take that video down, and I think it got taken down.
that
And of
happened quick?
course, but apparently, yes. With Hermes specifically, because it's made in France, I'm not entirely sure with the made in France. And as you can see, there's not a lot of bags that are made in France. So there's probably
Some
just
Chanel
Hermes and
bags.
Chanel. Yeah, so it's probably just Hermes and Chanel. I know made in France is a little bit more strict, but with made in Italy, there's definitely a lot of loopholes that you can do around the made in Italy aspect of it. And I think the first one is there's two things with this Chinese made in China or made in Italy
Hmm.
thing. So there's a lot of Chinese factories. Number one, there's a lot of Chinese factories that do produce for a lot of luxury conglomerates in China. And while I was living in Shanghai, I was in the fashion world I was working back then. This was like 15 years ago. I was
Okay.
working as a model, and so I wasn't really in the production side of it, but rumor has it, and everyone in the fashion industry kind of knew this, that there were villages or like areas, outside of Shanghai and all over China that were run and operated by the Chinese mafia, and that produced all of these goods, or at least like majority of them, like 70% of 70% of the, for example, if it's a handbag, 70% of it they would produce in China, and then they would send the rest
Handbags
of it.
or every product category?
I think literally footwear, every category. Yeah. So and also apparel, especially. In fact, like while I was living in Shanghai, there were even shops that would sell, apparently these, and they're saying they were like overruns or things that were perfect, and they would cut a part of the tags, so you can't really sell it as like a Gucci, let's say, shirt, because they would cut it, the tag, but you can still see it's Gucci, but it's like cut, and you would see them in shops, in these like huge shops in Shanghai. This is 15 years ago,
And you
and
think this
you would
was
see.
real Gucci, not counterfeit Gucci?
Well, yeah, you can never really tell the truth, but from my understanding, it was real. And you could put it side by side with when I went to the actual store, I was like, oh my God, it's exactly the same. But it's a shirt with like a print. It's the same exact print. And
Right.
it's not like it's a leather bag that's like, it's like a leather, some random leather, but this was the same exact print of a shirt. Like, it was like a specific type of like, you know, um, it was a check shirt. I had these check shirts from Gucci that was kind of like a little bit see through, and it was the same exact fabric. So I was like, oh my God. So I think it's definitely true, and I think we both looked at this the other day, where the current rules with made in Italy is, as long as there's a substantial part that's made in Italy, you can call it made in Italy, right? So
And
the
what
one,
is
okay, it's
substantial?
exactly. It's kind of like, what is substantial? You can sew the buttons, or you can sew the
Hmm.
sleeves. That's already pre-made in China, and you can just sew the sleeves and put the stitching and put the label, and that's substantial, right? Or sew the buttons. Of course, I think this was 15 years ago, but like obviously the laws has become stricter even within Italy. I
Hmm.
think in 2009 they passed something new. So this was after I was there. But even then, so there's the second component to this.
Tell us.
When you go, well, yes, when you go to Italy now, a lot of their factories are, a lot in the beginning of the 90s, they started to bring Chinese immigrants into Italy
Hmm.
because they were cheaper and they were more efficient.
Hmm.
So back then they started to become workers, and as more of them came, some of them weren't satisfied, so they started their own and have bought businesses that were actually far gone, or the factories that went out of business in Italy, they would buy them. So actually, when you go to one of the major cities in Italy now that produces a lot of the garments, is called Prato, which is outside of Florence.
Yes.
Majority of the factories there are now owned and operated by Chinese businesses. And and a lot of them have counterparts in China, which is kind of like really interesting. So now it's owned and operated in these past few decades. A lot of them have been, a lot of the, artisans.
Well, because you did bring up a really interesting point to me earlier, Mark, in our little group chat that we have, which was just asking me to really think about it and making me pause and reflect, which you did, on the sheer amount of product we see in the marketplace that says made in Italy, and
Mhm.
compare that to the size and scale of the Italian workforce and motivation to work and work hours and all of that, and do those two things add up? From my own perspective as a fashion editor, I remember visiting Italian footwear factories, mainly in the areas of Veneto and like Firenze, in the Tuscan area. That's where a lot of the footwear factories are. And learning that, first of all, shoe brands usually don't have their own factories. Like Christian Louboutin even doesn't have his own
Correct.
factories. Manolo Blahnik doesn't. Ferragamo, and then like all of the Saint Laurent's, Dior's, etc. They use different factories depending on the type of shoe and their expertise. And they're not all even in Italy. Like Spain is known for their espadrilles. So if you're getting a
Yes.
Celine espadrille, it's probably made in Spain. Same with Hermes, their espadrilles are made in Spain. But I met some Italians there who had done stints or were going to do stints in China, these very lucrative contracts to set up Italian standard footwear factories in China. And this
Hmm.
also happens like in Brazil. There's a lot of footwear produced in Brazil, in the Ponte Alegre southern region. And they would also have Italian, because Italians are considered really the experts when it comes to leather goods. So it really did make me think, okay, maybe they're setting up these like satellite plants and factories. And then I wanted to ask the question is like, what's so wrong about that? Like, should things say then made in Italy and China, or made in China by overseen by Italian people? Or should it say cheatily, as Tanner Leatherstein kind of purported and suggested? Like, what do you think is the solution there, so that there's consumer transparency and also that it just feels more aligned with current standards?
You're absolutely right on like the subcontracting of a lot of these brands. So sometimes some of the brands would subcontract, whoever specializes it into a different factory. But sometimes, these subcontractors would have a face of be like, okay, like here are my six Italian workers who's working at the factory today, and then not knowing, but the Chinese workers are really the ones who are working like, full time in Italy and also obviously in China. And what's wrong? I mean, you know what? I think Made in China could definitely have I think this is probably why these videos are coming up now. They're probably starting to expose like, hey, we're the ones who are we have become the artisans because we have become the ones who been doing, all the manufacturing for the past couple of decades. And, investment on their manufacturing systems and also their factories by the West, by the United States, by Europe. There's been more and more investment in these factories to improve, and there's more innovation. So all these owners have become more innovative with like textiles and also how to manufacturing products. So I think part of the reason why it hasn't really become a thing yet, when Made in China has become like a luxury cachet, I guess. They're still profiting from the Made in Italy products that they're probably they're mostly making.
Well,
They're
that's
they're
why they
getting the money.
charge the amount that they do.
Yeah, so if they're still making a lot of money from that, why would they ruin that relationship, right? So So it's actually really interesting time right now what's happening with TikTok and how they're exposing a lot of these brands. Notice that these videos would not show the other brands though. They probably on purpose showed the fake Hermes because they can't actually show the real brands that they're actually
Or
probably
they'll
working with. Yeah,
that
all
is
their contracts
definitely
will be gone. Yeah. So, which is actually really interesting. And they've become experts at, you can see and when you think about it, Moshe, like they need to sell thousands and thousands of bags and footwear, right? Like each of these brands to make their billions of dollars. Why are there no videos of made in Italy, Italians making all these thousands and thousands of units of footwear and handbags from start to finish? Not just the finish part, but
I've
why are
seen
there not?
footwear, but I haven't seen handbags done at scale like that personally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and also like apparel. Like, you won't see the factories. None of them will actually show you the factories. And the ones that, I think Brunello Cucinelli is actually a good brand that apparently like has like a village
I've
that they
been to their
employ.
factory. Yeah,
Yeah,
in San
so they're
Romeo.
probably one of the more credible ones that actually have
Yes.
an Italian team. But for the other brands, like I've never like have I don't see. And I don't see a lot of like younger Italian artisans either, like, working in any of the factories. You usually, none of our generation, I mean, I don't see anyone really doing that either. I don't, yeah, I mean, and, the Chinese workers in Italy now also are apparently a lot, some of them, there's alleged videos of like, some of them having sweatshops in Italy as well. So,
Which I would
which is,
love
which,
to check out. I think you should come
yeah.
visit me here in England, Mark, and then we'll just take a hop skip flight over to
And
Italy.
your audience can actually see, I mean, like Google on YouTube Prato Italy and made in Italy. You'll see a
Yes.
lot of videos of a lot of documentaries of this being exposed of Chinese factories in Italy.
Or check out the Brandy Hellville documentary because they get into this too, because part of the proposition that was put forth with Brandy Melville is the fact that it was made in Italy, but it was like very low prices and very
Hmm.
mass produced. And then they get into this documentary why. Okay. I want to look at some of these comments that were left here too. MJ506 says, I think social media influences or influencers are encouraging people to normalize having many bags, which is not attainable for the average
Hmm.
person. So, yeah, maybe that's part of the reason why Italy is having to outsource some of their manufacturing to keep up with like ever growing growth trajectories for these brands and also consumer demand. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
no, absolutely. And also, yeah, I feel like the luxury fashion category has become a little bit of a mass. Don't you think it has become a little bit more mass now? Like, people are there's more and more people who you can see like with designer handbags. I remember back in the day, in 20 years ago, it wasn't like that. And now
No.
everyone has like five Prada bags and like a couple of Chanels. I mean, back in the day, I don't know where people were going, but like, you know what I mean? Like now you'll see
What
like
was
a
your first
teenager
designer
has,
handbag, Mark?
I never had a handbag.
Or like
But
designer?
my mom is a collector of handbags, and
Ooh,
she had still to this day, and right now I think she's on a Loewe and Fendi situation right now, but like she's always loved Louis Vuitton back in the past, in the past, and she has quite a few, so I'm quite familiar with it.
I think, well, my first fake luxury handbag was I got like a Louis Vuitton Murakami pochette on Canal Street when I was like 15 and went to New
Wow.
York City. Uh because I what they didn't carry the Murakami stuff at the Toronto Louis Vuitton, I don't think. And then my first maybe real designer bag was I think it was Marc Jacobs actually. When I
Yeah,
moved to LA and Marc Jacobs had a really cool store on Melrose and I remember one
in
of
their
Demi Moore.
heyday.
Yes, and one of Demi Moore's daughters worked there and, like, sold me the bag at the time, and I just pretended like this was completely normal, and it was white and big and slouchy. It kinda looks like that new bag that Chanel just introduced now with, like, the cargo pocket on the side. I forget what that one is called, but yeah, that was my first designer handbag, and it
I
it
think that
served
was my
me very
sister's
well.
first designer handbag too. It was Marc
Really?
Jacobs. Yeah,
It was like an
I'm pretty
evolution of
sure.
the Sam.
Yeah, no, I know it's Marc Jacobs. I'm just not sure. I'm not familiar which specific bag, but for sure her first bag was Marc Jacobs when Marc Jacobs was really hot and like, back in the day.
Totally. I mean, still here and here in the UK, they love the Marc Jacobs totes that say, like Gen Z, that say Marc Jacobs tote literally on it. Those are quite popular to be used as like a school bag or something like that, I've noticed. Okay, so some
Yes.
other comments we've got here are Hermes has been going through it with the Walmart bag thing and now this. Yeah, but their sales continue to grow. So are they really going through it? What do you think, Mark?
I think they're fine. I mean, in fact, their sales are going, their prices are going up, their sales are going, and maybe there's a reason why, I do think Hermes is actually made in France specifically,
Yes, we need
just
to just
because,
dispel that. Like Hermes is not
yeah.
made in China. Not that there's
And also,
anything wrong with that.
but also Hermes bags, you can't just, and maybe that's the reason why you can't buy it immediately, because there's not enough sufficient supply, because they're not mass producing it. Not
Mm-hmm.
like all the other brands that are mass producing it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I think there's a reason for that, right? That's why they have to continue to raise the prices because they can't keep up with the supply because they're not mass produced.
Simple as that. You heard it
Yeah.
here. Well, Wind says, this is really interesting. My coffee has one specific farm where the beans are from, and two, breakdown of what percentage of price goes where. And I'd love something similar for clothes. I think that's called Everlane. I think Everlane does that, no?
I'm not sure if Evelyn does it, but it's funny because like obviously
Let's write it down.
a lot of parts in clothing are made everywhere in the world. So it's kind of like hard to say, you know, I mean, in one bag, like maybe the buckles made from somewhere and, and the leathers from Europe, but it's made in actually in China, but then it's finished in Italy. There's a lot of
Yes.
stages with, so I don't know how you would break down the percentage, or unless you go that specific in terms of like leather from Spain, stitches from, China. I mean, I don't know.
Yes. And I also think it's important to not take things too literally. Like I had one commenter this week say to me that they thought it was a disgrace that Hermes wasn't acknowledging the people of Togo that they got the leather from for their Togo leather bags. And I was like, is the leather from Togo? I looked it up. It's not. It's a type of leather. It has nothing to do with the country of Togo. But
Oh,
it's things like that where I think it can get very confusing. To your point though, like a lot of components that go into the products we consume, especially like hardware and software,
mhm.
are made in
Yeah,
China just because they know how to
correct.
do that really well. I mean, the hardware on an Hermes bag very well might be made in China. Like even I just have this bottle of perfume that's on my desk here from
Hmm.
Fern, which is an organic eau de parfum. It's a British brand, small batch, but like this bottle, this glass bottle and the metal piece, and I think even the paper label that is on it, like that probably was made in China.
Yeah, and made in China things these days, they're quite sophisticated to the point where a lot of the smaller brands now that I work with, if they want to have something produced, and this is like not super high luxury, this is like opening price point, not opening price point, but like not ultra luxury. If they want to have something made that's like under 500 units, they can have it made in China. But if they want to have something, if they want to have something made that's that have like thousands of units, then they have to go to Vietnam, and
Mm,
a lot of the and Vietnam and Cambodia. So now a lot of
sneakers,
these, yeah,
activewear.
correct. So now a lot of these Chinese factories have outposts as well in Cambodia and Vietnam for all these
That they're
opening
running.
price point, correct, that they're running. And that's how, and it all started because of Trump's first term, where he imposed tariffs on China.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of the factories, they moved into Southeast Asia. And of course, now that's also, they're getting hit with the Trump tariffs as well. So, but not
Oh my
as
God.
extreme as China. Um, but which is kind of we're living in an interesting world right now. So we'll see where this ends, this whole trade war.
Well, we have another, I mean, I know the tariffs are greatly affecting all this. We have about another 5 minutes, and
Mhm.
I see we have over 37 questions that I'm going to get to quickly in a bit. I just wanted to say, growing up, my mom had a factory where she would produce clothing and some accessories for her brand, which was called Linda Lundstrom. And there was about 100 workers there. And I don't think any of them were like born in Canada. Most of them were Chinese, Korean,
Correct.
Portuguese. There were some Italians there, but that, these were the highly skilled workers that were able to make the very high quality products and wanted these jobs in Canada. And I think if you look at a lot of countries that make things as well locally, they might still be made by people from other countries.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. I used to do the private label at one of the luxury retail stores in Canada. And I remember going to one of our Canadian factories that we did, tops for, and it was Chinese owned. She was Chinese Canadian, and all of her workers were Chinese immigrants, in Canada. So, even here in Los Angeles, majority of the workers are immigrants, whether they're Asian or Mexican. Majority of them are immigrants. So,
They're
which
women
is
too, a
correct.
lot of
Yeah.
the time.
So, yes. And now, yeah, the Chinese manufacturers now have definitely become, really advanced in terms of like their skill set, especially, their skill set and their efficiency. And that's why most of your products, whether they're iPhones or, well, we'll see about where this exposure goes to with the luxury
I
fashion
don't know.
brands.
I don't know. I mean, Mark, literally everything. Like my glasses right now, these say made in Italy, but they're Luxo. I mean, they're Caring Group. They're probably made by Luxottica, right? My
Yeah.
jacket is a Nina Bing. It's
Mhm.
leather, but it was made in China. I have a Nina Bing white jeans on, made in China. I have like a Varley sweatshirt underneath here, made in China. And then I have Prada sneakers, which presumably were made in Italy, but we know that the technology to make sneakers is a lot more advanced in Asia. What about you? Like, are you wearing anything that's made in Italy, or is it mostly made in China as
Well,
well?
you know what? This is actually these are actually Japanese brands, but it's funny. It's
Ooh,
funny that you said that because yes, I'm not sure where it's made, but it's probably made in China. To be quite honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually made in China. It's in Japanese, so I can't even read it.
you're
But
Japanese.
it's funny because I actually have consulted for an accessory brand. I'm not going to mention their name, but they did make everything in China and they would ship it to Japan and have it stamped made in Japan. And actually the Japanese are very they usually don't do this, but you'll find a factory that will agree to this, and they would like
Mm,
fix a certain part of it, like just like they really like adjust certain parts and inspect it if it's quality control, and they will stamp it as made
mm.
in Japan. I mean, this is very common. I mean, for manufacturing, a lot of people in manufacturing, I mean, are not surprised by this.
I'm getting a lot of comments here. Like India Nicole says, I wonder what the future holds for these brands because luxury is more mass, which is what you were saying, Mark. Selena says, but I wonder part of what luxury brands sell is the fantasy of craftsmanship and heritage. So I wonder if these brands can really gamble with their reputation slash trust and, kind of expand their horizons when they talk about where things are made. And Mygo Kobal says the triangle is a common practice in international commerce. I guess like things being sourced, made, and finished in various countries. Vision Aaron corrected me. Thank you. Safilo actually makes eyewear for Caring.
Hmm.
And so I also got a comment here from Adam Baydoun saying we shouldn't hate on China, to be honest. Most materials are sourced from there and assembled in Europe or the US. Completely agree. And I think
Completely
that's,
agree.
yeah, I think there's like definitely some racism baked in to this whole controversy of people causing an uproar about or being surprised about things made in China, things being made in China, or even being like accusatory of something being a lesser quality because it's made in China. That's not the case. It's just if something says made in Italy, the consumer expectation is that is where it's made.
And let's not forget, like, there's made in China that's like opening price point, but there's also made in China that's like really luxurious, right? So
Yes.
they do all. That's the thing. They do it all.
Mm-hmm. Miko Cabal says
So
among all luxury houses, there's a narrative that push to get accessories that are aspirational. That's a business and a business they are playing well. And yeah, maybe a lot of times those smaller accessories, especially ones that might have like plastic components, be it like AirPod covers or phone cases or that kind of thing, like, they're probably not making that in Italy or France just simply because like the technology and the machinery that's used to make injection molded products doesn't really exist
correct.
there.
Like it's actually going to be interesting how the Chinese market will actually, or the Chinese manufacturers can really rebrand. Like you said, like they should make an effort to rebrand made in China into something a little bit more that's associated with luxury.
Mm,
Of course, there needs to be a significant like Chinese brand maybe or a powerful house that actually would actually openly say that it's made in China. But it's funny because like, a lot of these designers would admit that they do most of their embroidery in India, right? But
hmm.
they wouldn't admit that they're made in China for some reason, which is kind
Why
of like
is that?
interesting. I don't know. Yeah. Or
Well, it's funny how certain countries develop reputations in different categories. It's only very recently that when you pair the words Korean with skincare, immediately people presume, oh, this shit is legit and it's going to work and make my skin look like glass. I mean, that wasn't the case 5 or 10 years ago. Korea didn't have that same widespread reputation. I would
well, they
argue.
didn't, yeah, they probably didn't have a reputation, but China has like a tainted reputation for having low quality products. But, that might have been the case in the past, like a couple of decades ago, but their manufacturing has really become extremely sophisticated. If you go to these factories, they're super organized and they're like, there's rows and rows and rows of like, like the lineup is like it's quite organized and it's actually not all of them are like sweatshops. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. But I definitely think we need to be careful when we are seeing videos on TikTok, etc.,
Yes.
of what they're trying to convince us of, and what is that motive? Like, is it having to do with devaluing or moving customers away from trying to play the Hermes game, both in the resale market and in store, and just go directly to a manufacturer that's able to make like a mirror like quality, or that there are counterfeit Hermes bags and every brand available,
Correct.
and the best ones in terms of the lookalike qualities come from, where would you say, China?
Yeah. They definitely have like they have like showrooms of it, like there's like top A, like grade A, grade double A, grade triple A. I mean, they
And
have
they
it
can
all in
fool
China.
even the experts. I mean, you hear all the time of people like on the Real or Vestiaire getting bags that they've bought and they don't think they passed the test of authenticity, even though they were authenticated.
Yeah, yeah. Hermes is tricky, but yeah. But for the other brands, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, I'm not 100% sure because I've never been to those factories where a lot of these designer goods were said they were made, um, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them were made there actually.
Somebody said leathers are sourced in Africa, made in China. I did see there was a video that was going viral as well, talking about how Nigeria is actually a hub for leather production. I think there's a number of regions though and there's actually have you ever heard of that show, that trade show they do, Mark, called Linella Pelle?
No.
It's basically just a leather trade show that they would have like
Oh,
in Milan and Paris, and then a satellite one in New York. And you'd go and you'd see like the leather industry is very interesting, but there's leathers from all around the world. And there's also tanneries, like there's where leathers are sourced, like the raw materials, and then there's where they're actually prepared so that they can be turned into goods. So, like, that's another thing that's interesting to look at, like all the different countries that are involved in a finished product.
correct. Yeah. That's what I was saying. Like, a handbag, like, yeah, the source can be from all different places, like 10 different places.
Definitely. Well, this has been such an interesting conversation. I hope that we like dispelled some myths, but also made everyone more motivated to seek out and do their own research and think about these things
Yes.
critically, because two things can be true at the same time. Like, a lot of luxury goods can and are made in France and Italy, but the scope of the manufacturing, in terms of the product categories and the mass scale of the luxury industry, is making it so that a lot these brands are having to explore other avenues and loopholes in order to produce this amount of product. So, does
Yes.
that kind of tie it up in a little bit of a bow, do you think, Mark?
I think so. Newsflash crew, do your own research. I mean, there's plenty of information out there online. There's lots of videos, lots of articles about it. It's probably just putting a spotlight on this, but there's a lot of people who have been looking into this for quite a while now. But this definitely has put a spotlight on this for sure.
Definitely. And I think it's really interesting to learn about all the material components that go into something and where they're from and the people that are specialists. And it's just a reminder of how, like, international fashion truly is, from
Mhm.
both a manufacturing side and a consumer side these days. And we're in this information age, so we're able to have these conversations.
And it just also goes to show how interconnected we all are and how like it's really the age of globalization where everything can be made in everywhere in five different places.
That's exactly it. Things are not made in one place anymore. I think we all need to keep that in mind. If we're expecting something to be made start to finish in one country,
Mhm.
unless it's not even a smoothie is, the fruit that's in your smoothie probably is from a few
Correct.
different countries. So
Maybe this is the silver lining with all the tariffs. We're starting to figure out like, oh my God, like, car components are made everywhere. Like, it's not just made in one country or like, now it's like the apparel industry's turn. Perhaps this is the silver lining of all of it.
Mark, the silver lining for me and of my day was having this conversation with you. Wind said
Mhm.
this was a great convo. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined too. We've had some really great engagement and so many comments. I don't think I've ever seen this many comments. So, Mark, I hope you'll join us again, because you have so many wonderful bonbons and expertise to share with our audience. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy my first podcast is Newsflash.
You nailed it. We love you. And everyone, for Mark's full name, because somebody just asked, it's Mark Marc Uquico, which is Y.
You nailed it.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye, everyone.
That wraps your news fash. I'm Moshe Lundstrom Halbert. Stick with me here and over on TikTok to stay up to date on all things fashion. If you have any questions or guest suggestions or feedback, please drop us a line at moshe@newsfashmedia.com.